The sleek private jet touched down unexpectedly at the tiny Pine Grove Municipal Airport, sending the local ground crew into a frenzy. Rain poured down as Aria Zhang, dressed in her usual power suit and heels, stepped onto the wet tarmac with a frustrated sigh. Being the CEO of Zentech Innovations meant her time was precious, and this technical malfunction was the last thing she needed. At least 3 days for the parts to arrive, Ms. Zhang, the mechanic, informed her apologetically. The nearest town's got a decent inn if you'd like to stay there. As her driver navigated the winding country roads toward Pine Grove, Aria's fingers flew across her phone screen, rescheduling meetings and sending urgent emails. The car suddenly screeched to a halt, jerking her forward. There, in the middle of the rain-slicked road, stood a limping golden retriever, soaked to the bone. Without thinking, Aria jumped out of the car, designer shoes splashing in puddles as she approached the frightened animal. "Hey there, sweet one," she called softly, her corporate persona melting away. As she inched closer, a beaten-up truck pulled up, and a tall man in muddy boots and a rain jacket jumped out. "Thank goodness you stopped," he called out, jogging over. "I've been chasing this old girl for the last mile." His warm brown eyes met Aria's, and something shifted in the air between them. "I'm River," he said, carefully approaching the dog. "I run the local animal shelter, and you are—" "Just call me Aria," she replied, helping him coax the dog closer. "I'm a tech consultant passing through town." Together, they managed to get the dog into River's truck. The rain had soaked through Aria's silk blouse, but she barely noticed. There was something about River's gentle handling of the animal, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, that made her forget about her missed meetings and corporate responsibilities. "The shelter's just down the road," River said. "Would you like to come check on her? Maybe grab a cup of coffee to warm up." Aria hesitated. Her assistant would be having a meltdown by now, and there were countless emails demanding her attention. But for once in her life, she decided to let the business world wait. "I'd love to," she said, surprising herself. The shelter turned out to be a cozy converted farmhouse, filled with the sounds of happy animals and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. River's Aunt May ran the front desk, immediately wrapping Aria in a warm towel and pressing a mug of hot chocolate into her hands. As River treated the dog's minor injuries, Aria found herself telling him about her life, or at least, a carefully edited version of it. She left out the part about running a Fortune 500 company and focused instead on her love of technology and problem-solving. "You're not like most city folks who pass through here," River observed, gently bandaging the dog's paw. "Most of them can't wait to get back to their important lives." Aria watched him work, noting how the animals all gravitated toward him, how his presence seemed to calm them. It was so different from her world of boardrooms and hostile takeovers. "Maybe I needed a break from that important life without realizing it," she said softly. As evening approached, River offered to drive her to the town's only inn. The rain had stopped, and the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Aria couldn't remember the last time she'd noticed a sunset. "Will you be around tomorrow?" River asked as they pulled up to the inn. The dog, we're calling her Lucky, could use another friendly face. Looking into his hopeful eyes, Aria made another impulsive decision. "Yes," she said. "I think I will be." Walking into the charming but modest inn, Aria felt lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, but for once, she didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, she found herself thinking about River's smile, the way he'd handled Lucky with such care, and how the simple act of helping an injured dog had made her feel more alive than any business deal ever had. As she drifted off to sleep in the quilted bed, Aria knew she was playing a dangerous game. Sooner or later, her real identity would come to light, but for now, she decided to embrace this unexpected detour. Unaware that this small town and its kind-hearted veterinarian were about to change her life forever, the morning sun streamed through the inn's lace curtains as Aria woke up to the unfamiliar sound of roosters crowing. For the first time in years, she hadn't set an alarm. Her phone showed 47 missed calls, but instead of panic, she felt a strange sense of peace. At the local diner, she discovered the joy of homemade blueberry pancakes served by Betty, a waitress who treated everyone like family. River called ahead. Betty winked, sliding an extra helping of bacon onto Aria's plate. said you helped save Lucky yesterday. That makes you a hero in our books." The diner's regulars welcomed her warmly, sharing town gossip and asking about her life in the city. Aria found herself relaxing into the conversation, carefully sidestepping questions about her work while soaking in the genuine friendliness of these people. Later at the shelter, River greeted her with a bright smile that made her heart skip. Lucky's tail wagged frantically at the sight of her. "She remembers you," River said, leading Aria to the dog's kennel. "Want to help me give her a bath?" Soon, Aria's designer clothes were replaced with borrowed overalls, her perfectly styled hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She laughed as Lucky shook water everywhere, soaking them both. River's Aunt May appeared with towels and hot coffee, her knowing smile making Aria blush. "I've never seen River quite so attentive to a visitor before," May commented while River was out getting more supplies. "He's usually all about the animals." Throughout the day, Aria found herself drawn into the shelter's rhythm. She helped walk dogs, cleaned kennels, and even assisted River with a minor surgery on a cat. Her corporate world felt increasingly distant. "You're a natural with them," River observed as they shared sandwiches in the shelter's back garden. "Most people who say they're just passing through don't roll up their sleeves like this." Aria watched a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "Maybe I needed to slow down more than I realized," she admitted. "Everything here feels so real." That evening, River took her to the town's weekly farmers market. The whole community gathered in the square, sharing food and music. An elderly couple taught Aria how to square dance, while River watched, grinning. "You've got some hidden talents," he teased as they walked through the market later, sampling local honey and fresh bread. Their hands brushed accidentally, sending tingles up Aria's arm. Back at the inn, Aria found herself extending her stay for another week. Her assistant was horrified, but Aria insisted she could handle things remotely. The truth was, she couldn't bear the thought of leaving just yet. Days began to flow together in a peaceful rhythm. Mornings at the diner, days at the shelter, evenings exploring the town with River. He showed her his favorite hiking trails, taught her to fish in the local stream, and introduced her to the simple pleasure of stargazing from the back of his truck. But reality kept trying to intrude. During a video call with her board members, Aria had to hide in her inn bathroom to maintain the illusion. News articles speculated about her whereabouts, and rumors of a possible hostile takeover began circulating. One evening, as they sat on River's porch watching the sunset, he turned to her with serious eyes. "You know, for someone who's just passing through, you fit in here pretty well." Aria's heart clenched. She wanted to tell him everything, about her company, her real life, the pressure she'd been under for years. Instead, she just smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder, trying to memorize the moment. That night, alone in her room, Aria stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed different, softer, happier, more real. But the weight of her secret grew heavier each day. Her phone buzzed with another crisis at the company. Instead of immediately responding, Aria walked to her window and looked out at the peaceful town below. Somewhere out there, River was probably doing his final rounds at the shelter, making sure all the animals were comfortable for the night. For the first time in her life, Aria Zhang, the ruthless CEO known for her unwavering focus on success, was completely, utterly torn. She had built her empire on always knowing exactly what she wanted. But now, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness, she wasn't sure anymore. The simple life she'd stumbled into, and the genuine connection she'd found with River, felt more valuable than any business deal she'd ever closed. But how long could she keep pretending to be someone she wasn't? And when the truth finally came out, would she lose everything she'd grown to love about this unexpected detour in her life? The morning dew still clung to the grass as Aria helped River load supplies into his truck. 2 weeks had passed since her unexpected arrival in Pine Grove, and she'd fallen into a comfortable routine that felt more like home than her penthouse ever had. "There's a family interested in adopting Lucky," River announced as they drove to the shelter. "But honestly, I think she's already chosen her person." He glanced meaningfully at Aria, who had grown inseparable from the golden retriever. At the shelter, Lucky greeted them with enthusiastic tail wags. The dog's leg had healed beautifully, and she followed Aria everywhere, helping with her daily tasks. Even now, as Aria sorted through donation paperwork, Lucky lay contentedly at her feet. You know, River said, leaning against the doorframe of the office, I've never seen someone adapt to shelter life so quickly. Most city folks can't handle the mess and the early mornings. Aria looked up, catching his warm gaze. Her heart fluttered, a feeling that was becoming dangerously familiar. Maybe I was meant for this life all along, she said softly, even as guilt gnawed at her conscience. That afternoon they took Lucky and a few other dogs for a walk around the lake. River's hand found hers naturally, and neither mentioned it. The simple contact felt more intimate than any fancy dinner date Aria had ever been on. Tell me more about your life before Pine Grove, River asked as they sat on a fallen log, watching the dogs play. You never really talk about it. Aria's stomach tightened. It was busy. Lots of meetings, deadlines, pressure. She focused on throwing a stick for Lucky, avoiding his eyes. Nothing as meaningful as what you do here. Everyone's work has meaning, River said thoughtfully. Even those big corporations. Though I admit, I'm not their biggest fan after what happened to my family's farm. Aria's heart nearly stopped. What happened? Some tech company bought up all the land around here a few years back. Zentech something. My parents fought it, but he shrugged, trying to hide old pain. That's why the shelter's so important to me. It's the last piece of our old property. The revelation hit Aria like a physical blow. She remembered that land acquisition. It had been one of her first major moves as CEO. She'd never considered the human cost, only the profit margins. Back at the shelter, Aria threw herself into work, trying to outrun her guilt. She helped with a difficult dog delivery, cleaned every kennel twice, and reorganized the entire medical supply room. Slow down, River laughed, catching her arm as she rushed past. The animals aren't going anywhere. His touch sent warmth through her, but now it was mixed with sharp regret. That evening, they joined the town's weekly potluck dinner. Aria had learned to bake Betty's famous apple pie, and the locals treated her like she'd lived there forever. River's Aunt May pulled her into conversations about the shelter's future, talking about long-term plans as if Aria's presence was a given. As music started playing and couples began to dance in the town square, River pulled her close. Under the string lights and stars, they swayed together, and Aria felt tears threatening. Everything she wanted was right here, but she'd built her happiness on a foundation of lies. Her phone buzzed, another crisis at Zentech. A competitor was making moves, and her board was getting impatient with her remote management. The real world was pressing in, threatening to shatter this dream she'd been living. Hey, River whispered, tilting her chin up. Where did you go just now? Looking into his honest eyes, Aria made a decision. River, there's something I need to tell you. But before she could continue, Lucky started barking excitedly. A group of kids had arrived with their newly adopted puppy, and River was needed to check on the newcomer. Watching him work, gentle and patient as always, Aria felt her courage fade. The thought of seeing his warm expression turn to betrayal was unbearable. Yet every moment she delayed made the eventual revelation worse. That night, alone in her inn room, Aria sat on the window seat, Lucky's head in her lap. The dog seemed to sense her turmoil, offering silent comfort. Outside, Pine Grove slept peacefully, unaware that their newest resident was the very person responsible for so much local hardship. Her laptop showed urgent emails about a possible hostile takeover at Zentech. Her empire was under threat, but for the first time in her life, Aria wasn't sure if she wanted to fight for it. The woman who had ruthlessly built that company felt like a stranger now. As she stroked Lucky's soft fur, Aria realized she'd found something in Pine Grove that all her billions couldn't buy: genuine connection, purpose, and love. But with every passing day, the truth grew more explosive, threatening to destroy not just her relationship with River, but the peace of the entire town. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow, she would tell him everything. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, Aria knew that tomorrow had been her promise to herself for the past week, and each day, she found another reason to wait just one more day. The weight of her secret felt heavier with each passing day as Aria walked through the shelter's morning routine. Lucky trotted faithfully by her side while she filled food bowls and changed water, her furry shadow offering silent support. River burst through the door, his face unusually serious. We've got an emergency case coming in. A farm outside town found some abandoned puppies. Within minutes, they were in his truck, racing down country roads. Aria watched his determined profile, wondering how someone could care so deeply about every animal that crossed his path. The same compassion that made her love him would make her deception hurt even more. At the farm, they found 3 tiny puppies huddled in a cardboard box. As River checked them over, Aria cradled the smallest one, warming it against her chest. The farmer's wife brought them hot coffee and homemade cookies, treating them like heroes. "You two make quite a team," the farmer commented, watching them work. "Reminds me of me and the missus when we were young." Back at the shelter, they worked side by side to settle the puppies into a warm kennel. River's hand brushed against hers as they arranged blankets, and the simple touch sent guilt coursing through her. "I don't know what I'd do without you here," River said softly. "It's like you were meant to find us." Aria's phone buzzed, another message from her board of directors. The hostile takeover threat was growing. Her company, the one she'd sacrificed everything to build, was in real danger. Yet somehow it felt less important than the way River was looking at her right now. During their lunch break, River's Aunt May brought in the local newspaper. "Look who made the front page," she beamed, showing them a photo of River and Aria at last week's adoption event. But there, in the business section, was another photo that made Aria's blood run cold. It was her, from a tech conference last year, announcing Zentech's latest acquisition. The headline read, "Zentech's CEO's mysterious absence raises questions." "Can I see that?" River reached for the paper, but Aria quickly spilled her coffee, creating a distraction. She couldn't let him see it. Not yet. Not like this. That afternoon, while cleaning kennels, Aria overheard River talking to May about his family's farm. "Dad would have loved to see the shelter thriving like this," he said. "At least we saved this small piece of it." Each word was like a knife in Aria's heart. Her company hadn't just bought their land, they'd crushed her family's legacy. And here she was, falling in love with the very person she'd hurt, pretending to be someone she wasn't. As sunset approached, River suggested a walk by the lake. Lucky bounded ahead of them, chasing fireflies. The scene was perfect, too perfect. Aria knew it was about to shatter. "River," she started, her voice shaking. "There's something I need to tell you." His phone rang, interrupting her confession. Another emergency. A horse in distress at a nearby ranch. As they rushed to help, Aria's own phone lit up with urgent messages. The takeover attempt was accelerating. Her board was demanding her immediate return. Later that night, exhausted from saving the horse, they sat on River's porch swing. Lucky lay at their feet, and River's arm was warm around her shoulders. The moment felt like a dream she never wanted to wake from. "You know what I love about you?" River said suddenly. "Your honesty. No games, no pretense. Just you exactly as you are." Aria felt physically sick. She stood abruptly, making an excuse about being tired. River's confused expression followed her as she hurried to her car. Back in her room, Aria paced frantically. Her two worlds were colliding. Tomorrow's local paper would surely run the full story about Zentech's crisis. River would see it. The whole town would know. She opened her laptop, staring at flight options back to the city. She could leave now, return to her real life, protect her company. It would break River's heart, but maybe that was better than him learning the truth. Lucky whined softly, pressing against her leg. The dog's trusting eyes reflected everything Aria had come to love about Pine Grove, the authenticity, the compassion, the simple joy of being exactly who you are. As midnight approached, Aria made her decision. She couldn't run anymore. Tomorrow, she would tell River everything, regardless of the consequences. She'd face whatever came next, the hurt, the anger, the loss of everything she'd found here. Because living one more day in this lie was harder than facing any truth, no matter how painful. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Lucky curled protectively around her. Aria wondered if love could be strong enough to survive the truth. Tomorrow, she would find out. The morning dawned gray and stormy, matching Aria's mood perfectly. She'd barely slept, rehearsing how to tell River the truth, but fate had other plans. She walked into the diner for her usual breakfast, only to find an unusual silence. Every eye turned to her, and conversations stopped. Betty, who usually greeted her with a warm smile, looked away quickly. On the counter lay the morning paper, her corporate headshot splashed across the front page. Zentech CEO living double life in small town. Her phone exploded with notifications. The story had gone viral. Lucky pressed against her legs, sensing her distress, but even the dog's comfort couldn't ease the panic rising in her chest. The diner's door chimed. River stood there, newspaper clutched in his hand, his face unreadable. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. The diner grew impossibly silent. Aria could hear her own heartbeat. "River, I can explain." "Is it true?" His voice cracked on the last word. Yes, the word felt like glass in her throat. River's laugh was bitter. "So the CEO who destroyed my family's farm has been playing house in our town. Was this some kind of game to you?" "No." Aria stepped forward, but he backed away. "It wasn't like that. I never meant." "To what? To lie? To pretend to be someone else?" His eyes, usually so warm, were cold now. "Did you enjoy watching us struggle while hiding who you really were?" Betty moved to stand beside River, along with other townspeople who'd become Aria's friends. Their faces showed hurt, betrayal, anger. The community she'd grown to love was closing ranks against her. "I fell in love with this town," Aria said desperately. "With the shelter, with Lucky, with you. None of that was fake." "But you were." River's words cut deep. Every moment, every conversation, every kiss, it was all built on lies. The diner's door chimed again. A group of reporters had found her, cameras flashing. The story of the billionaire CEO hiding in a small town was too juicy to ignore. Aria fled to the shelter, Lucky following faithfully. But even there, she found no peace. May was clearing out her locker, tears in her eyes. "I trusted you with our stories, with our pain," the older woman said. "How could you sit there and listen, knowing you were the cause?" The day became a blur of accusations, camera flashes, and painful confrontations. Her phone rang constantly. Board members, investors, reporters. Her carefully constructed worlds were colliding spectacularly. By evening, she found herself at the lake, their special place. Lucky sat beside her as rain began to fall. She heard footsteps behind her. "The reporters are saying you're here hiding from a hostile takeover," River said, his voice tight. "That your company's in trouble." "I wasn't hiding at first." Aria turned to face him, rain mixing with her tears. "The jet really did break down. But then I met you, and for the first time in my life, I felt real. I fell in love with you, River. That wasn't a lie. But you let me tell you about my family's farm. You watched me work to save the shelter, the last piece of our land, while knowing your company took everything else. I didn't know when I first came here. And when I found out, I was too scared to lose you." Aria stepped closer. "I'm not that person anymore. You showed me what really matters." "It's too late." River's voice was heavy with finality. "The shelter's already getting calls from your board. They're threatening to reclaim the land. Apparently, there was a clause in the original sale." Aria felt the ground drop from beneath her feet. In trying to protect her heart, she put everything River loved at risk. Lucky whined, moving between them, tail low. The dog they'd saved together now watched them fall apart. "I'll fix this," Aria promised. "I'll protect the shelter. I'll make it right." "Just go," River cut her off. "Go back to your real life. We were just a vacation from reality, right? A cute story for your next board meeting?" He walked away, leaving Aria in the rain. Lucky hesitated, looking between them, before following River. Even the dog had chosen sides. Back at the inn, Aria faced dozens of missed calls and emails. Her board was using her absence and the publicity to challenge her leadership. The life she'd built was crumbling on all fronts. As she packed her bags, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman who arrived in Pine Grove would have rushed back to the city, ready to fight for her company. But that woman was gone. Looking out at the town she'd grown to love, Aria made a decision. She couldn't undo the past, but maybe she could still shake the future. Her fingers flew across her phone, making calls, setting plans in motion. She might have lost River's love, but she could still fight for his dream, even if it meant sacrificing her own. The city lights felt harsh and artificial after Pine Grove's starlit skies. Aria sat in her penthouse office, surrounded by lawyers and board members, but her mind kept drifting to a small-town shelter and the life she'd left behind. "The takeover bid is gaining support," her CFO reported grimly. Our shareholders are concerned about your extended absence and recent behavior. Area barely heard him. On her desk sat the morning's paper showing a photo of Pine Grove's animal shelter. The headline read, "Small Town Shelter Faces Closure Amid Corporate Drama." "Ms. Zhang, are you listening?" Her lawyer's voice snapped her back to reality. "We need to focus on saving your company." "No," Area said quietly, then louder, "no, we need to focus on saving that shelter." The room erupted in protests. Her board members argued about fiduciary duty and shareholder value. But Area had spent weeks seeing the world through River's eyes. Money and power meant nothing compared to the lives they'd affected. She pulled up the original land acquisition files on her computer. Every ruthless decision, every family displaced, it was all there in cold, corporate language. She'd been so proud of that deal once. "Get me every document about Pine Grove," she commanded, "and call an emergency board meeting." For the next 3 days, Area worked without sleep. She drafted proposals, made calls, and fought with her board. Her corporate reputation for being a fierce negotiator took on new purpose. "You're risking everything," her CFO warned. "The hostile takeover." "Let them try," Area interrupted, not looking up from her work. "I'm done putting profits before people." News of her plans leaked to the press. Business channels debated her sanity. Shareholders threatened to sue, but for the first time in her career, Area felt absolutely certain of her path. On the 4th day, she walked into the board meeting with Lucky's rescue photo pinned to her blazer. The dog's journey from injured stray to beloved companion mirrored her own transformation. "Gentlemen," she addressed the room, "I'm announcing a major restructuring of Zentech's Community Impact Program." Her presentation was meticulous. She showed how their aggressive land acquisitions had destroyed communities while providing only short-term profits. Then she revealed her plan: a massive reinvestment in rural communities, starting with Pine Grove. "This is business suicide," one board member sputtered. "No," Area countered, "this is business evolution. We can make money without destroying lives." "I've seen it. I've lived it." The debate raged for hours, but Area had prepared for this fight better than any in her career. She'd learned persistence from River, compassion from the shelter animals, and community value from Pine Grove itself. By midnight, she had their grudging agreement. The hostile takeover threat was neutralized by her bold new vision. Zentech would become a leader in ethical business practices. Without pausing to celebrate, Area drove through the night back to Pine Grove. The town was quiet when she arrived, dawn just breaking over the hills. She found River at the shelter, already starting his morning rounds. Lucky, who had stayed with him, barked in recognition but didn't run to her. "The shelter's not closing," Area said without preamble. "In fact, it's getting fully funded. And not just this shelter, we're creating a network of them across all the communities affected by Zentech's past actions." River continued his work, not looking at her. "Why?" "Because you were right. About everything." Area stepped closer. "I forgot who I was in my pursuit of success. This town, this shelter, you reminded me that real value isn't measured in dollars." She handed him the legal documents. "The land is yours now, really yours. No clauses, no corporate control. And there's more. Funding for expansion, medical equipment, staff." River finally met her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. Not for forgiveness. I know that's too much to ask. But because it's right." Area turned to leave, her heart heavy. "Wait," River called. "The board meeting, it's all over the news. You risked everything. Some things are worth the risk." Lucky whined, moving between them again, but this time wagging her tail hopefully. The dog they'd saved together now watched them find their way back. "I can't trust you," River said softly. "I know." Area nodded. "But maybe you can trust my actions. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to make things right." The morning sun broke through the clouds, painting the shelter in golden light. Outside, Pine Grove was waking up to news of its unexpected victory against corporate greed. Area knew the road ahead would be hard. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. But as Lucky pressed against her leg, offering forgiveness more easily than humans do. She felt hope flutter in her chest. Sometimes, she realized, you have to lose everything to find out what you're really worth. Months passed like leaves turning from summer to fall. The shelter, now expanded and thriving, had become a model for rural animal care. Aria split her time between running Zentech and implementing her community restoration program, making sure every town affected by her company's past actions received support. Pine Grove was changing too. The shelter's success had brought new life to the community. Local businesses were growing, and families who'd left years ago were returning, drawn by the promise of sustainable development that preserved the town's character. On a crisp autumn morning, Aria pulled up to the shelter in her now familiar pickup truck, her corporate cars long forgotten. Lucky, who now split her time between River and Aria, bounded out to greet her. "The new medical wing is almost ready," River said by way of greeting. Their interactions had slowly evolved from awkward silence to cautious professionalism to something warmer, if still guarded. Together, they walked through the shelter's expanded facilities. What had once been a struggling operation was now a state-of-the-art center, complete with rehabilitation areas, training spaces, and a free veterinary clinic for local families. "Remember when we could barely afford dog food?" River mused, watching volunteers work with rescue animals in the new training yard. "Now we're helping other shelters get started." "You're helping them," Aria corrected. "I just provided the resources. The heart of this place was always you." A comfortable silence fell between them as they reached their favorite spot by the lake. Lucky splashed in the water, chasing ducks that had long since learned to ignore her playful advances. "The town council is grateful," River said finally. "What you've done here. It's more than making amends. You've given people hope." Aria watched the sunset paint the water gold. "I learned something important here in Pine Grove. Success isn't about what you can take, it's about what you can give back." "The mighty CEO goes soft," River teased, a glimpse of their old warmth showing through. "Maybe I needed to go soft to become stronger." She turned to face him. "I'm stepping down as CEO." River's eyes widened. "What?" "The board's announcing it tomorrow." "I'm creating a foundation to oversee our community programs full-time. Zentech will still be part of my life, but not all of it." "Are you sure? That company was your whole world." "Was," Aria emphasized. "Then I found a better one. Several, actually." She gestured to the shelter, the town, and the space between them. Lucky chose that moment to shake off her lake water, spraying them both. Their shared laughter felt like breaking ice in spring. "I miss us," River said suddenly, seriously. "The real us, not the lie. I've been watching you these past months, seeing who you really are. It's better than any story you could have made up." Aria's heart skipped. "I miss us too, every day." "I'm not saying it's fixed," he cautioned. "Trust takes time." "Time I'm willing to spend," she replied, "right here, being exactly who I am." Lucky barked, as if agreeing, and dropped a muddy stick between them. Some things hadn't changed. The dogs still believed in second chances. That evening, the town held its harvest festival. Aria helped set up alongside everyone else, no longer the outsider or the secret CEO, just another member of the community. Betty from the diner brought her famous pies, May organized the children's games, and River's shelter animals made special appearances. Under strings of twinkling lights, River found her again. "Dance with me?" he asked, holding out his hand. As they swayed to the music, Aria felt the weight of secrets and corporate pressures fall away. This was real success, not the number in her bank account or the title on her business card, but the feeling of belonging, of making a difference, of being loved for who she truly was. "You know," River murmured, "Lucky knew who you were all along. Dogs always see the real person." "Smarter than humans that way," Aria smiled. Above them, stars sparkled in the clear night sky. The same stars she'd seen on her first night in Pine Grove, when a broken-down jet had led her to a broken part of herself she didn't know needed fixing. Lucky lay at their feet, content. Around them, the town celebrated not just the harvest, but a new beginning. Children played with shelter puppies, old farmers chatted with new entrepreneurs, and the future felt full of possibility. "So," River said softly, "what's your story now?" Aria looked at the life she'd found, lost, and fought to rebuild. "No more stories," she replied. Just truth. And hope. And maybe, he prompted. She smiled, feeling truly herself for the first time in her life. Maybe love, if we're brave enough to try again. The music played on, the stars twinkled above, and in a small town that had taught a billionaire CEO the true meaning of wealth, two people and their rescue dog began writing a new chapter together.